The galaxy made a terrible mistake when it assumed humanity's greatest weapon was its warships. They believed our strength was measured in megatonnage and laser fire. They were wrong. Our true strength, the force that would one day make empires reconsider the very nature of power, was memory and loyalty. The year was 2248. The UEF Discovery, a lone spear of durasteel and hope, drifted on the edge of a star system so forgotten it didn't even have a name on human charts, only a catalog number, XT-77B. Its sensors, the most advanced in the fleet, probed the cosmic graveyard, painting a picture of profound silence. Commander Aris Thorne stood on the command bridge. The steady hum of the life supported familiar comfort. But the data on his main screen told a story of death. A star, a bloated, dying red giant, clung to existence, its light a feeble ember in the vast dark. The planets that circled it were frozen tombs, their atmospheres long since collapsed into ice. "Anything, Lieutenant?" Aris asked, his voice a low baritone that barely disturbed the bridge's quiet focus. He'd been on this deep-range mapping mission for 6 months, and the solitude of the void was beginning to wear on the crew. Lieutenant Mara Finn, her face bathed in the cool blue light of her sensor display, didn't look up immediately. Lots of rock and ice. Commander. Standard end-stage system. But there's an anomaly on the third planet. Faint metallurgical signatures. Consistent, not random. She finally turned, her brow furrowed. And the architecture, it's a match. A 97% probability match to the Vorel database. Aris felt the air leave his lungs as if he'd been struck. The Vorel. It was a name from childhood stories, from history lessons, from the very foundation of modern human society. Every child knew the story. A century ago, Earth was dying, not from war, but from its own sun. A series of unprecedented solar flare cascades were building, threatening to scorch the planet clean of all life. Our best science offered no solution, only a countdown to extinction. Then they came, 3 ships, elegant and silent, shaped like falling leaves. The Vorel. They didn't hail, they didn't threaten. They simply went to work. Their gift was a gravity lattice, a miraculous piece of technology that stabilized our sun's ferocious tantrums. But the energy required to deploy it was catastrophic. It burned out the unique quantum drives that were their only means of returning to their home constellation. They saved 8 billion strangers, and in doing so, stranded themselves in our solar system. After a year of sharing knowledge, they simply vanished into the void on sublight engines, seeking a new home, refusing to be a burden. We promised, as a species, we would never forget. A debt to the stars is paid with the same currency. Remembrance, Aris whispered, the old adage feeling suddenly, terrifyingly real. The life signs, Aris asked, his mouth dry. He was almost afraid of the answer, afraid to confirm that this was not just an archaeological find, but a living, breathing tragedy. Mara's voice was soft, somber. Minimal, Commander. Scattered. A few hundred biosigns, maybe less. They're faint, fading in and out. The system star is in its final stages of collapse. They're freezing in the dark down there. Aris moved to the command chair, his movements deliberate. Open a channel. Maximum gain. Broadcast on all legacy frequencies, the ones from the first contact records. He took a steadying breath. This is Commander Aris Thorne of the United Earth Fleet Vessel Discovery. We are here. We remember you. Please respond. The silence that followed was heavier than the void outside. It stretched for 1 minute, then 2. The crew held their breath. Then a crackle broke the silence, a voice woven from static and what sounded like immense age. "Human, you found us." The voice was ancient, tired, each word an effort. "I am Elder Kalen. We remember you also." "Elder Kalen," Aris said, his voice firm, imbued with conviction he hoped was contagious. "Hold on. Just hold on. Help is coming. I swear it to you." He didn't wait. He moved to his private terminal and composed a priority burst message, the highest alert level. He attached all sensor data, the communication logs, the biosign readings. He labeled it with the code that had been drilled into every fleet officer since the Vorel departure. Echo Protocol. The message was simple. The Vorel are found. They are dying. XT-77B. Request immediate assistance. The response from Earth Command was not just an approval. It was a declaration that shook the foundations of human space. It bypassed normal chains of command. Coming directly from the Global Defense Director, the entire Sol Defense Fleet was immediately retasked. The Mars Colonial Guard was ordered to stand down and prepare for deployment. Colony ships, halfway to their new Eden worlds, were ordered to change course. Private freighters, medical frigates, deep space mining platforms, even luxury starliners. Every vessel that could hold atmosphere and generate thrust was mobilized under the Emergency Powers Act. The message from Earth Command was only 5 words long, but they echoed across 100 light years. Bring our friends home. No exceptions. Within days, the Sigma Draconis system, once a silent tomb, was filled with the blinding, beautiful light of human ships. A trickle became a flood. Hundreds became thousands. Military dreadnoughts like the UEF Valiant, their hulls bristling with weapons that would now never be fired in anger, slid into formation alongside civilian freighters hauling terraforming equipment and prefab habitats. It was a civilization's entire strength, its very soul, projected across the light years in a display of unity that was as terrifying as it was beautiful. Aris transferred his command to the Valiant. He stood beside Admiral Valeriana on her immense observation deck as Elder Kalen was brought aboard. The Vorel was frail, his skin like pale blue parchment, his large, luminous eyes dimmed by age and hardship. He was supported by 2 younger Vorel, who looked at the human fleet with a mixture of awe and fear. Kalen's gaze was fixed on the Armada, a sea of lights against the black. "Your people," he began, his voice a whisper of wind chimes. "You have come in force. You risk everything. Your home systems are undefended. Your colonies exposed. Why? For a handful of dying ancients." Admiral Valeriana, a woman who had personally commanded the Sol defense grid for 2 decades, stood with her hands clasped behind her back. Her face was etched with the lines of command, but her eyes were soft. "Elder Kalen, a century ago, your people gave us a future. You asked for nothing. You gave us everything. We are merely returning what was loaned to us." She turned to him. "We do not abandon our history or those who shaped it. It is not in our nature. But the cost." Kalen gestured weakly toward the dying star. "The energy required to even attempt to stabilize our sun, it would bankrupt a dozen worlds. The resources, the time, is irrelevant," the Admiral stated, her voice leaving no room for argument. "Tell me, Elder, did the Vorel ask for a cost analysis before they saved 8 billion human souls? Did they hesitate because the price was too high?" Kalen was silent for a long moment, a profound sadness and a dawning hope warring in his ancient eyes. "No," he said finally. "No, we did not." The operation, dubbed Phoenix Star, commenced. It was a feat of cosmic engineering that human scientists had theorized was impossible. The Valiant was joined by 3 massive catalyst ships, vessels designed not for war, but for stellar management. They moved into a precise triangular formation around the red giant. For 24 hours, they fired focused, unimaginably powerful streams of stabilized hydrogen, compressed into a superfluid state, directly into the star's core. The process was violently unstable. For 6 hours, the star convulsed, throwing off solar flares that would have vaporized planets. The entire human fleet held its position, shields glowing white-hot as they weathered the stellar tantrum. Alarms blared, and power levels fluctuated dangerously across the fleet. It seemed for a moment that their compassion would be their doom, that they would only succeed in destroying the very system they had come to save. And then it happened. The star's violent shuddering began to subside. The morbid, dull red began to brighten, to shift in color. It warmed to a fiery orange and then miraculously to a stable, brilliant, life-giving yellow. Light, true and warm, flooded the Vorel system for the first time in 50 years. A cheer erupted across the fleet, a wave of human emotion transmitted across thousands of ships. But humanity wasn't finished. While the stars settled, The second phase began. Terraforming platforms, like floating cities, descended into the atmospheres of the frozen planets. Thermal drills melted the permafrost, and atmospheric processors began churning out breathable air. Prefabricated cities, gleaming and new, rose from the icy wastes. The humans were not just saving a people. They were rebuilding a civilization from the ashes, gifting the Vorel not just survival, but a thriving future. In the war rooms of the Zenture Empire, the most dominant military power in the Galactic Arm, analysts and strategists watched the live sensor feeds in stunned silence. For years, they had been preparing for a war of conquest against humanity. Their intelligence reports painted humans as disorganized, sentimental, and weak. Their resources spread too thin, their loyalties divided. They had planned to strike at Sol, while the fleet was dispersed. Now, they watched in horror and awe as that same dispersed fleet mobilized with a speed and coordination they thought impossible. They saw a species that could move its entire naval might across the galaxy in a matter of weeks, not for conquest, but for salvation. High strategist Vorel, a being of sharp angles and cold logic, stared at the holographic display, showing the reignited star and the thousands of human vessels. He turned to his stunned war council. "Cancel the invasion," he said, his voice flat. There were immediate protests, arguments about tactical advantages, and wasted years of planning. Vorel silenced him with a slash of his hand. "Any species that fights this hard for its friends," he declared, "is a species we cannot afford to fight. You think we would be fighting their navy? You are fools. We would be fighting their spirit. And that is a war we cannot win." The news of humanity's actions and the Zenture's reaction rippled through the Galactic Conclave, the central governing body of the major spacefaring races. An emergency session was convened in an uproar. Delegates argued, their clicks, whistles, and translated speeches creating a cacophony of fear and confusion. It was into this chaos that Elder Kalen walked. He was no longer frail. He stood tall, his back straight, his eyes clear and bright, his skin having regained a healthy cerulean hue. He took the central podium, and the chamber fell silent. "You sit here in fear," Kalen began, his voice strong and clear. "You fear humanity's fleet? Their weapons? Their numbers? You're looking at the wrong thing." He activated the holographic projectors, showing the restored Vorel worlds, the cities, the reignited sun. "You see a military power. I see a moral one. You fear their ability to destroy. You should be in awe of their capacity to build. You fear their ambition. You should respect their memory." He let the images sink in. They do not fight for resources or territory. They fight for debts owed a century past. They fight for friends. They move stars for a promise. What do you think they would do for an ally? What do you think they would do to an enemy who threatened one? He looked around the chamber, meeting the gaze of every delegate. A moral universe will always, eventually, align with them. The question you must ask yourselves today is not how to contain humanity. The question is, will you stand with them or will you stand in their way? As the last human ship, the UEF Discovery, prepared to leave the restored Vorel system, now officially renamed New Vorel, a new message was received from Earth. It was from Director Evangeline Thorne, Aris's own great-granddaughter, now head of the Xenocultural Exchange Bureau. "Elder Kalen," the message read, "the debt is paid, but the friendship we hope is just beginning. The galaxy is watching. Let us show them what friends can do." Kalen stood on the surface of his homeworld, feeling its warm wind on his face, watching the human ship jump to warp. He looked out at the galaxy, now watching humanity with a potent mixture of newfound respect, alliance, and a deep, ingrained caution. The lesson had been learned, etched into the stars themselves. Humanity's true strength was not in its weapons, but in its word. Its power was not in its fury, but in its fidelity. And the galaxy would never again underestimate the winds of thought. Before you go, if the story of loyalty across the stars resonated with you, if it reminded you that our greatest legacies are built not on what we take, but on what we give, please do us a great favor and like the video. It truly helps the channel winds of thought reach others who cherish these tales. Thank you for watching.